Let's get at her.
We're ready. We're ready to go. Welcome, everybody, to our December 16, 2025 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District meeting. And first item is to call this meeting to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions from staff? None? Any from the board members?
Do we need to update the claims list and the consent agenda?
That'll be under the consent agenda.
Okay.
We'll have to remove that from the consent.
Okay,
Yeah, but the agenda is still the same.
it's fine as is. Okay.
Okay, so with that, then I need a motion to approve the agenda as is.
So moved?
Second. Motion made by Manager Burnett, second by Manager Boyles. All in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried, I believe, 5-0. Close enough. All right, public comment is our next item on the agenda. If there's anybody here from the public who wishes to address the board on an item not on the agenda, please come forward. There, I don't see anybody, so we're going to move on to our old and new business, which is programs and projects update from staff. So,
thank you, President Loney. For the programs update, we'll take a look at the annual lake level graph for both Prior Lake in red and Spring Lake in green. Spring Lake shows much more bounce, and that is reflected from rain events throughout the summer. And then those undulations in that green graph lead to the steady climb in Prior Lake that we saw. So there's a nice pyramid shape to Prior Lake that reflects early summer, early and midsummer rain events, and then a pretty dry fall. So our current lake levels are a little lower than average, but pretty normal over the last 10 years. I'll move on to talk about water quality report cards. So we update our Tier 1 report cards annually. Tier 2 and 3 get updated on a lower frequency or as needed. The grades, A, B, C, D, are based on a 3-year analysis using the Canadian Water Quality Index, and then that's substituted with Minnesota Lake standards. So what's interesting about the Canadian Water Quality Index is that it accounts for the frequency and amplitude of results. And it's important that you can take into effect of, you can look at a result and it can be over what the state standard is, but we're accounting for how much over, how severe is that over, and how often does that happen. Seasonality plays a big factor in lake water quality, and our report cards reflect that. We also look at 10-year trends, and those are calculated using statistical analysis software called R, using the seasonal Kendall test. This tells us if the trend that we're seeing is significant, or if it's not, it's by chance. So these report cards give us a snapshot of what our lake water quality is like based off of state water quality standards. So to start off, we'll look at Lower Prior Lake. I just want to point at the 3 green A's and the charts to the right. There's this blue line, and that's the actual result, and above that is a red line. When the blue line is beneath the red line, that means we're meeting these goals. Lower Prior Lake has been doing this for the 10 years that data shown on this graph. The trends aren't really as important because it's meeting these state water quality standards. So they can move around a little bit, but they're meeting them by a pretty significant amount. And if we look over here on the right, I have another little chart that shows 2016, and this was grades from 2014 through 2016, and then a 10-year trend for that ending in 2016. And that shows that Prior Lake's been doing the same thing for the past 20 years. That's really great. So we always mention that Lower Prior Lake is our gold standard, and you can see that it's had really good water quality for the last 20 years. Now onto a lake that's showing significant improvements. We're currently at an A for phosphorus, B for chlorophyll A, and A for clarity. And that's used using the Secchi disc. The trends are improving across the board here. If you look over at 2016, not the same story as we see today. We had a C, an F, and a C. Upper Prior Lake has made pretty tremendous rebound in water quality. On to Spring Lake. So we're seeing a little bit of a decline in water quality in Spring Lake. Phosphorus is at a C, chlorophyll A at a C, and clarity at a B. So there's still an improving trend in chlorophyll A and clarity, and that's been over the past 10 years. And a lot of that is due to the many of the projects, including alum treatments and upstream ferrochloride carp removals. But there's been minor improvements since 2016. Overall, the lake has had a pretty slow trend towards improvement, and we're still working on that. And then lastly, we're looking at Fish Lake. All three grades show a C. There are no trends on any of these over the last 10 years, and that's pretty similar with what we're seeing from the 2010 to 2019 trends as well. And this is, looking at the water quality results, Fish Lake has been just above what our state water quality standards are. So it hasn't been meeting our goals. We've got a lake management plan and goals for the future on Fish Lake. Any questions on lake report cards?
Any questions for Jeff? Nope, looks good.
Thank you. Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I was just talking to two of the board members from the Spring Lake Association, who is their president and one of their other board members. And at their last board meeting, they discussed that they have noticed how the water quality on Spring Lake have deteriorated significantly over the last 2 years. And I believe while the trend over the 10 years look better, the last 1 to 2 years look concerning. So that's why I explained to them why we are working on the upstream management, and other issues to try and solve that.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving into the projects section of today's agenda. Going to be pretty brief today, just talking about 2 iron enhanced sand filters that are at various stages in the pipeline. So the first is to report that our Swamp Lake iron enhanced sand filter, which will remove nutrients headed to Spring Lake, to Manager Morkenberg's point. This project was substantially complete before the snow fell, and they've got a few things to button up in spring. But it shouldn't take too long, and we'll have that up and running in next year's season. So we're really excited. Krieger Excavating did a great job on the site, and EOR did a great job managing the construction and design. So thank you to everyone who made that go so smoothly. We'll have several outreach components that are involved in this project you'll see next year because that was part of a grant we received. So we'll have some fun ways to report on this project coming down soon. And then the other project I wanted to touch on is the Spring Lake West project, and that is an iron-enhanced sand filter that is in design right now. We had done a feasibility study, obtained an easement earlier this year, and now we're going into final design. And so I just wanted to point out some of the things that have come about. And so, as you may know, an iron-enhanced sand filter is designed to remove phosphorus. That's our primary impairment on our lakes to mining nutrients. However, the value of having monitoring data over time that's consistent is that we can look at the graph on the left and see results that inform our design more fully. So we knew this area was high with phosphorus based on our monitoring as well. However, this site also semi-consistently is high for E. coli as well. So you can see the different lines on the graph. Those are different stream sampling sites. All of them report E. coli at some point. That blue line that's up near the top is, noticeably more upwards on the graph. So this is not like a scientifically lengthy study. It's just 1 year, but it's just to show the value of monitoring in that pulling out that E. coli is something we could look at here. So we took that information and brought it to EUR and said, is there anything we should be considering in our design of this iron-enhanced sand filter to take care of the E. coli while we're designing this site? There's a couple different medias that you can mix into sand filters. It's kind of a new science, but we looked at those and established that really with just the iron-enhanced sand filter that was already planned, we're going to get about 70% of E. coli removal as well. So I just wanted to share that that's an added benefit we're getting out of these sites. In cases, if E. coli was the primary concern pollutant, then we could design it focus on that and get maybe 5 or 10% more, but we're getting a lot of reduction with our existing focus of getting phosphorus out as well. So we're really excited about that and just wanted to highlight that we only know this because of monitoring and the experts that we pull into these projects. And then I also wanted to touch on some updates that you'll see in the 2026 cost share docket. This is wordy, but I'll talk through it. That will be coming through your board packet in January along with the soil and water contract. And most of the changes are pretty administrative cleanup items, but there are some changes I wanted to just let you know are coming. The first is that we previously provided cost share for maintenance of prairies, so things like prescribed burn, mowing, and those were at higher rates. People were having trouble doing that. They were having trouble finding prescribed burn applicators at a reasonable cost. And so we would like to change that to a simple $50 incentive and more education for landowners to be aware of that maintenance. So that's one change. We also wanted to reduce the contract term for conversion of cropland from 10 years down to 5 years, mostly to reduce the barrier of entry. We found that that length of time was deterring people and not necessarily, it's not a practice we're very concerned about reversing. So wanted to get more people through the door in that. We also updated the cost share docket to reflect the rates that are available because soil and water has a federal grant, the RCPP grant. So that'll bring up soil health rates considerably. And then we also adjusted some rates for the variable rate application. So variable rate application is when a farmer looks at how many nutrients are across their field in different places and then applies the nutrients they need relative to how much is needed in that spot. So we reduced, the maximum was previously 6,000, we reduced it to 4,000. We also reduced the contract term. So instead of requiring someone to do it for 3 years, down to 1 year. The idea is people in and that it's a practice that doesn't need to be compensated at that length. And then lastly, there's a reduction of the threshold for soil and water board approval. It was previously 20,000. Any project above 20,000 went to Soil and Water's board, and now that would move up to 50,000. So to give you a frame of reference, the Scott WMO already at 50,000 for approval, and SWCD was at 20,000. We will remain at 10,000. So if we start doing bigger projects more often, we can think about moving ours up as well, but that's where those stand today. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Emily on that? These docket changes, this is something that we'll be approving in the future, or have we
Yes, in January.
in January? Okay, very good. Good update. And I think that biocharge was a presentation at the Minnesota Watershed. I think I was there.
It was. Yep.
Administrator Gacy.
It's possible that this contract may not come through until February.
Okay. It's next year, we'll just say. Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to Personnel Policy Manual Update. And I'm going to turn this over to Joni for an introduction.
Yes,
Item.
President Loney and managers. The purpose of our Personnel Policy Manual is to establish a uniform, equitable, and effective system for personnel administration for employees of the district. Our policy had not received significant updates since 2015, and updates were needed for us to be compliant with regulatory updates, such as Minnesota paid leave. In addition, technology advances have occurred in these last 10 years, such as the ability to do remote working and networking into the system, as well as artificial intelligence. And also, updates were needed to better clarify district operations. Our previous draft of the manual was very unclear as to what benefits part-time employees were eligible. So we really kind of went through and sharpened up the clarity so that we actually have, once again, better direction moving forward. So in addition, the new draft is reorganized, and it is much easier to find information and also to update it moving forward. One of our handicaps with the last draft was if we wanted to put an update through to the manual, you had to update the entire manual. Now we have structured it with advice from our consultants. Now we can update on a section-by-section basis. So I would expect that we'll be able to make more frequent updates and make sure it's current moving forward. A first draft of these updated manual was reviewed by managers Loney and Boyles. A second draft was presented at the November workshop to the managers. The second draft was also shared with staff, and they brought forward a lot of good comments to help us once again provide additional clarity in terms of the application of certain policies. With the adoption of the plan, this really is a major step forward, but we still have work to do. So we'll still need to proceed with making some updates to our safety manual, our drug and alcohol policy, drug and alcohol testing policy, and our governance manual. So once again, while this is a good first step, we're going to continue to update other manuals moving forward here in the next year. We have Christina Patsoulas here with Flattery and Hood, and I just want to give her a big round of applause. It was really, she's with Flattery and Hood, and we would have never made this leap without her assistance. She's also here to answer any questions that you may have after this presentation. So staff is recommending that the board approve the Personnel Policy Manual update effective January 1st, 2026.
Thank you, Joni. It is my understanding we do need to approve this because of the Minnesota Paid Leave Act. We need to make this approval tonight or make any changes if necessary.
That is correct. We do need to, well, we set the rate already for our contributions. So we have met the need for Minnesota paid leave for 2020, effective January 1st, 2026. But it would be nice to get this manual approved, understanding that it's not perfect, but now we have a mechanism to make updates, more efficiently moving forward.
That's a good point to make. This was a really good step, but probably we'll find some holes as we start to implement it throughout the year. So with that, any questions? This has been to the committee, it has been through board review. Christina is here to answer any other questions you may have. Frank, you have any questions?
No, I had mine.
You had your
Answered,
question?
yeah.
Okay.
If you want a motion, I'll provide it.
Yeah, we'll take a motion.
I'd like to move the personnel policy as submitted.
Motion made by Manager Boyles,
Second.
second by Manager Borkenberg. Okay, with that, we can have discussion if there's any other discussion. If not, I assume you're ready to vote. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. That was easy. Okay, second, we're going to go to a conservation easement amendment, Springview Meadows. And I don't know, is this Emily going to handle this, or
That
Or
would be
Troy.
me.
Troy gonna
Actually, I will make the presentation, and we have Troy Koopfall here in case there are some questions that the managers have that he could answer. So a conservation easement was initiated, this conservation easement was initiated, or the establishment of this conservation easement was established a couple of weeks after Maggie Karshina, who was our previous permit staff person, had departed from the district. And so myself, along with another staff member, were trying to advance this initiative. And we were a little green, let's just put it that way. Earlier plans submitted by the developer depicted the buffer that is required by our rules to protect wetlands. And those are depicted in the graphic here in the lime green. So the developer had submitted plans depicting this buffer area. Our district engineer reviewed and affirmed that these buffer areas were compliant with the district rules. The developer then also went ahead and installed the signs adjacent to these bright green buffer areas to depict the boundaries of the buffer areas. But when the conservation or the declaration of conservation easements was submitted to the district for approval, it did not show these green areas as the easement areas, but instead showed drainage and utility easements that were put on the site by the city of Bear Lake as the areas for the conservation easement. And we as staff either missed this discrepancy or didn't were like, well, it captured the boundary, the buffer, so, well, we're good. And the conservation easement was adopted by the board in December of 2021, and those easements are with the easements as the depicted in yellow, the drainage and utility easements, instead of the buffer areas. So fast forward to 2024, 2025, and as Scott Soil and Water has begun to assist us to ensure that the conservation easement signs were properly installed and started to perform their compliance inspections, they identified numerous encroachments into the conservation easement, which is that, once again, into the yellow area, the drainage and utility easement area. But these encroachments were not necessarily encroachments into the buffer itself, including 3 private privacy fences, an entrance monument to the development, paved areas to the stormwater ponds, and some mowing. So in addition, in the last year or two, the City of Prior Lake has started the practice of mowing their drainage and utility easements to improve future access. So we have a bit of a discrepancy here because we have 2 easements on the same area. Our easement says to the property owners, you cannot mow the vegetation in our easement. But then the city will come in every couple of years and mow that area. And, they have good reason because they're wanting to do this from a maintenance standpoint. But it is very confusing and frustrating for the residents when we say don't mow, and then someone comes in and mows. And that is the problem we have come to realize what happens when we have both a conservation easement over the drainage and utility easement, and in particular in those areas where the drainage and utility easement is over a stormwater BMP and not our buffer. So there are basically kind of 3 options, potential options that we're bringing forward. First, we could enforce the easements as recorded, and this would require 10 landowners to cease mowing up to 12 feet of their backyards, and 3 landowners to relocate their fences, and potential removal of an entrance monument. A second option would be that we would record encroachment agreements for all of these, which would allow the current violations to remain in place. A third option is to amend the easement boundaries. This would align the easement with the originally approved buffers areas, and this is the option that staff is recommending. Next. Moving with option 3, this would really basically restore consistency of where we're putting easements to be inconsistent with the district rules. It would resolve all of the current violations that we have identified. It reduces the future confusion regarding compliance inspections. It decreases the number of parcels encumbered by the easement from 14 to 12. And it resolves this vegetation management conflict of mowing versus not mowing. In order, though, to do this option 3, we are anticipating a cost of somewhere of $13,000 to $16,000, because this will require us to order an encumbrance, mortgage encumbrance, owner and encumbrance agreements, I believe, recording updated amendments or easements on the titles, an extensive amount of soil and water staff time to engage with all of these property owners, and some legal review. In our easement amendment policy, one of the sections says changes requiring board approval, that district staff may recommend an easement amendment with significant changes to improve water quality, value, or enforceability of an easement. I see this as an enforceability issue. In this case, the district would cover all district expenses related to the easement amendment or as negotiated with the landowner. So staff is recommending that the Board of Managers authorize the district administrator to pursue amending conservation easement document A 1149087 on 14 parcels in Springview Meadows, execute an amendment documents, and waive amendment fees.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the board members? Manager Tofinelli.
Just so I understand this, when you have the D&U easement boundary and a conservation easement, which has priority?
Manager Tofinelli, I'm not sure one has priority over another. They're both equal easements over the property by two different entities. The city has a drainage and utility easement over this area, and we have a conservation easement over the area. I will say I failed to mention this. So this is not a unique situation. There are going to be several. We're working with the city right now to identify how many times we have a joint D&U easement and conservation easement over the same area. We have a meeting scheduled in January when this will be a focus of conversation between the city and the watershed district to see if there is, how we can better address this issue. You know, is there a lighter touch that the city can do in their easements, in their, maintenance activities associated in the drainage and utility easements to the extent possible, we can still preserve our conservation easement values. So once again, we are trying to work through this with the city.
Okay, I'll ask this differently. Can we prevent the city from mowing in a conservation easement?
Carl,
I'm speaking out of turn from certainly not a lawyer, but our attorney. I think your ability would be working with the city and not even talk about the legalities of the overlapping easements. I think Joni mentioned that there's more of these out there. I don't know how many of them, and even in this one, it seemed like the berm around the wetland, which the city would want to be mowing, is not coincidental with necessarily the buffer. So I think it would be more of a common sense discussion with the city to say, we get that or we get that you want to mow that berm so you don't have volunteer trees growing up and resulting in access issue. Just stay out of the buffer. I think that would be the approach. But there might be a few of these where the buffer is part of the berm too, but this one doesn't appear to be the case, so.
right, and I would say though, we did have a property owner approach us and said, hey, it's actually in the northern easement, D&U easement, and questioning about whether, there can be mowing in there. And, so once again, it's, per our easement, it's no. But it does create some friction for us to say, no, you can't mow it, and then to have another entity come in and mow it.
Go ahead, Matt.
So the city, this will be something the district would pick up 100% of the cost, and the city has no obligation to contribute to that. That comes out of our budget. 13 to 16,000.
That is correct, because this is really amending our conservation easement. It would be amending our easements once again to retract back from that drainage and utility easement area back to the green area, which is truly our conservation easement. So essentially, it would be removing, let's see if I can move the mouse here. For example, in the upper right, we would amend it so that our easement now is really only encompassing this green area instead of this entire yellow area. So then the city can come in and do whatever they want for their maintenance. But this is really on us. You know, in reality, we should have only set up the easement on this green area. That's by our rules where we have jurisdiction to put an easement. We inadvertently put that conservation easement over the entire D&U easement. Troy, do you want to add to this conversation?
I might, Mr. President, if you're okay with that, contribute to the conversation regarding which entity prevails in terms of what can be done. One of the provisions of the conservation easement is maintenance of stormwater facilities. So whether or not mowing could fall under there could be up for debate, but it's certainly qualified by definition as maintenance.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Manager Mumberg.
Yeah, when I look at the picture here, it seems like there are as far as I can see, there are wetland areas in those areas that are circled by the yellow. It looks like there's several areas with water in it, probably, I would assume, wetland. Is that correct? Or?
So Manager Markerberg, actually the wetlands, if you can see my mouse, the wetland is to the north of this green area,
Yep.
the far northeast. This is a stormwater pond. It is where my mouse is now. That is purely just a stormwater pond. It is not a wetland. This is a wetland in the south area. And once again, our easement is, our buffer area is moving around that wetland. This basin further to the south, once again, is only a stormwater basin.
But that means is say in the southern part there, that area inside the green area is a wetland area and therefore should be protected from like mowing and things like that in general. Is that correct? Or?
Right. Once again, the way our rules are written is really for us to establish a vegetated buffer around the edges of a wetland or watercourse, and our easements are really over our buffer. Obviously, they do protect those water resources, but our rules do not place an easement over the wetland itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. I don't think anybody disagrees with the fix. I think it's the cost that kind of, and when I read this, that there was an approved boundary, did we give the approved buffer boundary to the city? And it's up to them to make sure it got placed on the plat or recorded? Or is it up to us to record it?
It's on us to ensure that that boundary is properly described in our conservation easement, the declaration of conservation easement that gets recorded on their parcel. The city has no responsibility for the buffer.
Well, having been a staff member, probably in the same position, where you sometimes make a mistake or something got through the hoops, so to speak. I mean, this is something I don't think it's happened. Hopefully this hasn't happened a lot, but I mean, I could see where it happens. There was a confusion, and the conservation easement got to be the D&U, and was not the intent. So, Manager Tofinelli wants to see.
Could you elaborate on why option 2 is distasteful? That seems to be a more economically pleasing option to me. So maybe you could elaborate.
We certainly could go down the road with the encroachment agreements. It still will never, it would not resolve the discrepancy between the maintenance of the stormwater facilities and user perception. But it is a viable alternative.
And I think the encroachments, would we be looking at the fences only, or every landowner?
It's a little harder to also enforce the mowing on when we have mowing violations with an encroachment. Troy, do you have anything to add with the enforceability of going with the encroachment agreement?
Yes, President Loney, manager. So, excuse me, the concept of the encroachment agreement, at least as I understand it, over the conversations we've had, is to address more or less fixed encroachments where you have permanent structures or, well, in-ground structures that would be extremely difficult to move, and or situations where the district has not enforced other aspects of the easement for many years, and there's an established use inside the easement that's in violation of the easement but hasn't been really addressed for many, many years, and therefore it's what the landowner comes to expect to be able to do within their easements. While the fences may be considered encroachments of a fixed nature, the mowing definitely is not. So for those various reasons, we thought that going through the amendment route was just a lot cleaner. It is also easier from an enforcement standpoint moving into the future. Just the complexity of every parcel having a separate encroachment agreement. That is something that anybody who goes out there from now, indefinitely to do these inspections need to be aware of. And when they go out there and look at where the boundary is, they have to basically understand that there are certain restrictions or uses of the land that would normally be in violation but are not because of that agreement. So it injects some complexity and confusion long term.
Question then. When I know about conservation easements, they are recorded on the parcel.
That is correct.
So each parcel right now has the drainage and utility description on their parcel as a conservation.
Correct. Each parcel has our conservation easement recorded on their parcel, and that conservation easement is the area of the drainage and utility easement,
Right.
not just the buffer.
Do the parcels need to have their property information updated to a new conservation easement then?
If we would amend it, then we would then update the easement for each one of these parcels. We would record a new.
So that's part of the.
That's part of the process.
Okay, just wanted to let everybody know that's probably the biggest cost. Is redoing the easement and then recording a new conservation easement on 12 or 14 parcels.
I'm quite clear on the cost. And
Yeah.
it becomes a cost versus a convenience.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect Troy and his comments.
Mm-hmm.
Fixed structure, I get. Fences are pretty fixed. I don't understand when a developer takes his plan in and it's not represented correctly, if there's not an obligation that it was presented poorly. I just don't like
Yeah.
the number to fix this. That's what I don't like.
Does this item need to be determined tonight?
You could table the decision, and we could bring it back at a later meeting.
No, let's just do it.
February.
We should just deal with it.
What do you,
Tonight.
okay, does somebody want to make a motion on an option? Recommendation from staff is option 3.
So moved.
Motion made by Manager Boyle, second by Manager Burnett. Any more discussion on this? Any more? I mean, I don't like the fact it's cost, but I do think we need to clean it up. That this is our duty to make sure it's done right, and I think that's the way I would vote, so. Okay, no more, Manager Finelli.
I don't disagree with you, but there's 2 ways to do this. So you have to choose one. And so it's not disagreeing with cleaning it up, I'm just disagreeing with the recommendation on how.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
well, the motion has been made to amend the easement boundaries. That would align the easement with the originally approved buffer area,
Which is option 3.
option 3.
And so they are accurate, correct?
Yes,
We are making something inaccurate, accurate. In fact, many somethings, each of those titles.
right. I don't like it either, but I think this is the
I
best
don't
way
like
to
the
go.
money either.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried 3-2.
3-2.
Okay, very good. Well, that was a good discussion.
So if you have to go, maybe you take the budget out of order, if you want to vote on it.
I can do the next, I think the next one is going to be
Okay,
pretty easy.
okay.
Okay, the next item is our P-lock low gate benefit analysis and operation guidance memorandum.
I wonder if I could, one comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. To Troy Kufel, we just wanted to thank the Soil and Water Conservation District for helping us with all working with the easements, and thank you. Yep. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Okay, so Jeff, are you going to handle this low float?
President Loney, I will kick us off. For a little background, the district's one of its 3 guiding principles is to reduce flooding impacts. We've been working on a flood mitigation effort by improving outlet structure operations. Some background, the outlet structure was originally constructed in 1983 and was sort of part of the impetus for the watershed district. It was reconstructed in 2010. The DNR permits the operations through the outlet structure management policy and operations operating procedures permit. Now, within the outlet structure, which is the only outlet of Prior Lake, there's a weir where water automatically flows, and then there is a low gate beneath the weir that can be opened. This low gate was not designed to manage high flows and is not expected to manage high waters, though there is some benefits to opening that low gate during a water level elevation of 902.5, which is where the weir is set, and above, up until about 903.5. The district has been working with Carl and his team at EOR to help understand how to better manage the outlet structure, including the low gate. In early 2024, we discussed with the Prior Lake Outlet Channel cooperators our goal of better managing the low gate and finding benefits in operating it to reduce flood potentials on Prior Lake. Now, EOR's been working on a multi-phased task of trying to look through the benefits of this low gate and then provide guidance on how to better manage. So task one was understanding the theoretical maximum benefits during wet weather, and this was really looking at the 2014 flood event. They modeled that event and then input into that model all the timing, the best timing to use the low gate. So that task found that using optimal timing, it reduced the time it took the lake to peak, and then it reduced that peak level. So there are benefits to using the low gate if timed right. Task two, so what are those potential benefits during average weather? They did a lot of work to classify soil conditions. So we all know that during wet weather, extended wet weather, soil becomes moist, and when we get rain events, water travels through the watershed faster than if it was drier. That would reduce the overall impact of large rain events. So they determined which rain events would lead to greater than an elevation on Prior Lake of 904. The National Weather Service created a custom 7-day precipitation forecast for us. So that is being utilized in this procedures by EOR. So within these task two, that document, EOR created a series of graphs that would tell us at which water levels the lake would reach during forecasted rain events. There's a lot to take in here, but essentially it says, say if we get a 4-inch rain event, which is that green line, it shows where the lake level would reach based on initial lake levels. We started using that this year already. It's been very instrumental in helping us make decisions on when to use the low gate. It's a predictive chart. It's simple and it works great. We can take into account where we expect the lake could be. So task 3, the final task, was to create standard operating procedures. And the goal here is to create consistent, transparent methodology for the district. You know, if residents ask us, how do we know when to open the gate? Joni and I look at each other and say, well, what's Carl say? You know, it's not as calculated as we need it to be or want it to be. So this is helping us get to that stage of confidence. It's to make it repeatable. So there's a whole series of steps and calculations and field measurements. And then this just gives staff clear direction on when to take quick, snappy actions. So over here on the right is just an AI-generated chart from Carl's memo. And, you know, I think that's something that I'm going to look into here in the future is updating the O&M manual that was last updated for the outlet structure in 2011. So, and then we have within the budget for next year to automate this process. Carl's available for any questions on this task 3. And, you know, it's been a 2-year process, so a lot to take in here. This is a voting item, so with that, I'll just mention that staff motion to accept the PLOC low gate benefit analysis and operational guidance memorandum.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Manager Tofinelli.
I'll apologize if I'm going to ask you to refresh my memory. We discussed this a while back, and if this is going to be an operational guidance, I believe we have a process and procedure for the actual cleaning. We've talked about weeds and having this great data. That's theoretically with everything open, no weed, no logs. Should this refer to the procedure or tie it into the operation that in higher water, we adjust the frequency? I know we've discussed this. I just thought it might be in here and somehow referenced in this document, so please let me understand that better.
Manager Toffenelli. Certainly, that discussion we had this summer, maybe fall, about how to manage vegetation and high water has been implemented, and I am drafting that update in the outlet structure operations and maintenance manual. This is, I thought about including it all as one package, but I just didn't want to sidetrack from the fact that this was EOR's multi-year task. And so the vegetation will be input into the O&M manual, and I'll have that hopefully updated to be board approved early next year.
My only concern was making sure they were tied together, and a decision made here would also, I don't want to say force the review, but have that as part of the process was all. This is very, it's great work, so it's not meant to take away, it's just to close the loop. Thank you.
That's good point, Matt. I did forget about that when we had that discussion of the weeds and everything, making sure it's clean. It affects the operation.
When there's a guy that can get down in the weeds, that's me.
We can count on you. All right. Any other questions on the policy or the memorandum?
Do we have a motion? I'm sorry.
And we do not have a motion yet.
I'll move it with the understanding that what Manager Toffenelli was talking about is incorporated in the approval. Is that satisfactory? Just second.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made by Manager Boyle, second by Manager Toffenelli. Any more discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. All right, now we're up to Resolution 25408, adopting the 2026 budget. And I'm going to turn this over to Administrator Giese to
President
Give us an
Loney and
update.
managers. In August, the board adopted Resolution 25400, approving ad valorem levy of $2,156,000 and a budget of $3,988,456. Discussion at the November workshop. It was based on discussions at the November workshop. It was my understanding that no changes would occur to the ad valorem levy amount, which represents a 5.35% levy increase from the previous year. With no change in the levy, the resolution that was approved in August stands. Subsequent to August, though, staff have a better understanding of the 2026 projects and programs, along with their associated costs and revenues, and recommends the adoption of a revised 2026 budget in the amount of $4,044,456. With this updated budget, 81% of the budget is directed towards programs and projects to improve water quality and/or flood reduction. In particular, this budget will include funds to wrap up the construction of our ferric chloride site improvements, to wrap up constructions of the Swamp Lake iron enhanced sand filter, to perform an alum treatment on Upper Prior Lake. That one item alone will account for 24% of the 2026 budget. It also includes the 200th Street Pond Improvement Project, the Spring Lake West Iron Enhanced Sand Filter final design and application solicitation, the Desilt Pond Improvements final design, permitting, and grant application solicitation, and the Highway 13 wetland excavation final design and permitting. 6% of the budget is allocated to the Prior Lake Outlet Channel operations and maintenance. Staff has had great success in securing grants, resulting in a healthy budget reserve for the district. Therefore, instead of levy funds, this budget proposes that the district use budget reserves to fund 41% of the 2026 budget. And it also includes funds to get, let me back up here. Assuming that the district also takes on the role of drainage authority for County Ditch 13, this budget also includes some funds for the staff to get that program up and running. So staff recommends the board approve Resolution 25408, adopting the 2026 budget in the amount of $4,044,406.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion to approve Resolution 25408?
One question. How does that compare with the 5.35 we were talking about before?
The budget, the ad valorem levy remains the same at 5.35,
Okay,
consistent with what was approved in August.
so moved.
Okay, a motion made by Manager Boyles, second by Manager Tofinelli. And what I read from what Joni told us, quite a bit of the budget reserve, alum, all the project budget reserve, that's why it's up to $4 million. So those monies we put away over the years that we're spending in 2026. Any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay, not seeing any. So we ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And I'm going to turn this meeting over to Vice President Boyles, because I do have to leave for another meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And you can handle it very well.
Try and do it as expertly as you do. Our next agenda item is item 4.6, Desilt Pond and High Flow Bypass Final Design and Construction Management Scope of Services. There's a mouthful.
Yes. I'll give you a little introduction, and then if you have technical hard questions, I'll refer you to Carl.
Okay.
But to refresh your memories, this is a project that had a feasibility study completed just last month. You saw the summary of that at last board meeting, and the capital project was ordered in September. And this project is going to reduce nutrients running into Spring Lake by basically improving the efficiency and operation of the ferric chloride system, specifically the desiltation pond. And so that's that picture on the left is the desiltation system. And the little icons below are the proposed improvements that we would be looking at progressing to final design. This project is a little more complex in design, so you'll see a slightly higher relative cost of engineering services compared to the estimated construction costs, and that's due to just nuanced engineering elements, such as the fact that this will require some geotechnical work. It's in a very low-grade area with likely poor soils. This area is also public waters and a pretty constricted permitting environment to work within, as well as the fact the design is going to have to be retrofitted in the existing system. So all that being said, we received a scope of services from EUR to do that work. Despite the nuances of engineering, this project in the total cost, including engineering, legal, construction, is still a very highly cost-effective project. It's about $91 per pound. In comparison, another very high priority project, Spring West Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, is about $350 per pound. So very effective. It'll remove somewhere between 230 and 280 pounds, which is also a big hitter for us too. So with that in mind, we believe this project will be very competitive. Grants, we're asking for approval for the engineering to get us to that point, with the understanding that we would progress this design and engineering work in 2026 budget, and then pursue grant funding or future levies to go beyond that. So without further ado, I'll leave it to questions, but there is a motion suggested on here that staff propose a motion to authorize the district administrator to enter into the contract with EOR, amount not to exceed $118,500, and with any further non-substantive changes on advice of council, and to enter into change orders in an aggregate amount not to exceed $11,850, or 10% of the contract not to exceed.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, are there questions whatsoever for managers? No questions? Okay, now I'm seeking a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Manager Burnett, who's the second? Thank you. Manager Morkerberg. Any further discussion? Okay, there being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign, and I vote aye. All right. Well, now we're down to the treasurer's report. Mr. Treasurer, are you prepared? Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And board members. So the financial report in general, like this time of year here, reflects 10 months of the district payments to vendors and 11 months of payroll activity. So for that reasons, the expenditures are, there's generally, in general, I would say the expenditures are in line with what we would expect for this time of the year. And so our general fund expenditures are at 89% of the budget, and the implementation fund at 52% of the budget. And so as mentioned above, is like we'll still expect larger expenditures to come through on the implementation fund. And in particularly, there's payments for the swamp iron enhanced sand filter, and we'll get an invoice from Scott Soil and Water for the fourth quarter, and those are related to cost share expenses, farmer-led council, permitting, and easements. Most of our summer monitoring the aquatic invasive species activities and the iron chloride operations activity is already reflected in the report. Right now, the report you read, the Treasurer's report says that our cash balances are less than 50% of the budget. And in general, we try to be above 50%, and I'm glad to say we are above 50% because we received the second tax remittance from Scott County in early December. The cash flow statement has been revised this year here to reflect the fund commitments, and particularly we have removed the alum internal loading reserve from the committed funds, and that lowers the committed fund balance. These funds will still be used for their purpose in this case, particularly for the alum treatment off of Prior Lake. But it will be transferred to a different account so we can better track the expenses in 2026. When you look at the cash flow, you can see that we are projected to have adequate cash cover to operations in 2026. The cost analysis, we don't have any specific comments for this month here. As we discussed that last month, you know, a lot of our expenses are going to covering all our projects. And so the good news for last year was that we spent quite a lot of money on projects, but we got a lot of projects done. So thank you to our staff. And that's the end of my report. Any questions?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Yep.
Any questions from board members? Board members, any questions? Okay, we do, as our practice, we do not adopt the reports, but we've heard them and they are read into the minutes as we have just done. Now, we do read the consent agenda items, do we not? You think?
Yes, Manager Boyles, we do, and we do also, staff does have, staff recommends removing item 6.5 from the consent agenda.
Could we just insert the new in place of the old? And still keep it on the consent agenda? I mean, each has got a copy.
I guess yes.
Well, if it's inappropriate, then I'll take the blame. The items on the consent agenda this evening, ladies and gentlemen, include meeting minutes for November 18th, both for the board workshop and board meeting. Also minutes for the CAC meetings of July 31 and September 25. Also claims list, bank purchase card expenditures. That is what was just being referred to. We've received a new amended copy. There are a couple of different numbers on one than on the other. The good news is the claims are down to 123,476.25 as opposed to the 124 something or other that I don't have right in front of me. Year-end fund commitments, we have Resolution 25-409, Alum Internal Loading Fund Balance Commitment, and Resolution 25-410, Capital Project Planning Fund Commitment. Only two left. 2026 WSB, that is a contractor, CARP Management Service Contract, and finally, Wetland Inventory Update and Web Map Development Scope of Services. I'm seeking a motion for that entire group of agenda items, unless you would like to remove one for further discussion and
So moved.
consideration.
So moved.
Okay, very good. A motion by Manager Morkenberg and second by Manager Toffanelli. Any questions at all by anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as read signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign? No. So we're 4-0 on that. The final item for tonight's agenda is to give you a little view of what's coming up in January. Board of Managers Workshop meets Tuesday, January 20th, 2026, again 4 p.m. in the Parkview Conference Room. Also on Tuesday, January 20th, is our Board of Managers meeting for January, first one for the year 2026 in these council chambers. The PLOC cooperators also have a special meeting Thursday, January 22nd, 2026, 10 a.m. here at City Hall, or you can jump on virtually. We have the address. I don't know if that shows at our website or exactly where they can get that. If you come in person, it would be in the Wagon Bridge conference room downstairs. The Lake Friendly Farm Awards are Wednesday, January 28, 2026, I think that means to be, 12 to 2 p.m. at the Prior Lake VFW. There is an RSVP required, and that is our normal phone number, 447, what is it, 4166?
Any phone number if you leave a,
Okay.
message.
Very good. And then finally, the CAC has a meeting Thursday, January 29, 2026, 6 p.m. In the Wagon Bridge Conference Room, which is downstairs. There's no action necessary. Is there any other action to come before the board Any other action to come before the board? No? Well, then on behalf of the board and the staff, if you don't mind, we wish you the happiest of holidays and a great 2026, although we'll see you in just a month. So it's not like they'll have to wait long. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Oh, that's right.
So moved.
Second, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Same sign. No one. Thank you.